It's just released video of Nicholas Cruz the day he was arrested in connection with the Parkland school shooting, the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history.
Taking off his button-down shirt to reveal this, a white t-shirt with the word killer scribbled on it, showing it off with a smug smile on his face.
High school shooters know how to handle a gun than most policemen. This is why they usually end up claiming so many lives anytime they go on their rampage. But then, these high school shooters never escape the wrath of the law, no matter their age. Here are the most brutal fates of school shooters in prison. Eric Harris and Dylann Klebold. Eric Harris and Dylann Klebold were both seniors at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, but their actions didn't just ruin their lives, but also plunged the school into deep shame and sorrow.
A lot of students were being quiet. Some girls were crying, and some girls were begging for their life.
Senior high school students are known for taunting or sometimes bullying those in lower classes. However, these two guys took things to the extreme when they opened fire on innocent juniors and employees at their school in broad daylight. Chaos broke out as students and teachers were fleeing, and many others ran for cover. Many ended up with bullets in their backs, while several others sustained injuries in the middle of the stampede. However, a number of people lost their lives. The harrowing incident occurred on April 20th, 1999, when these two crazy students ended up killing 13 people, leaving 24 injured. No one saw this coming. No one. Not even the parents of the shooters.
It doesn't get any harder than this. Mourners saying goodbye to the young victims of the Columbine shooting. But as thousands paid their respects, nearby another funeral went almost unnoticed. One of the killers, Dylann Klebold, was quietly laid to rest at this church. A small service attended by only 15 friends and family. Reverend Don Markshausen performed the service for Dylann's distraught parents.
They just know their son, who they loved, was getting ready for college. And they even paid the money on Monday for his dorm fees.
Initially, everyone thought it was a maniac episode, meaning the students weren't in their right minds. However, they were all shocked when the police verified that the two culprits had been planning their attack for over a year. The cops found the evidence after searching the homes of the boys in a quest to find out what they knew.
Authorities are trying to determine what they knew. Colorado Governor Bill Owens had his own opinion.
I haven't talked to the Jefferson County Sheriff personally, but I saw him, and he's a friend of mine, and I saw what he was saying yesterday, and that is that they found in one of the gunman's homes clear evidence out sitting in the room of what was about to happen. And if that's true, I think that perhaps charges will be filed and certainly should be filed.
Harris, 18, and 17-year-old Klebold had carefully gathered several firearms and explosives, which they used in the attack. They had also intended to hurt their teachers and peers with the attack, which they did as well. It's still a mystery why these two boys decided to carry out such a deadly act of violence, but in the end, they managed to spread terror and hold the school hostage for almost an hour until the cops fished them out. However, by the time they were nabbed, the duo was already dead. They had gone ahead to take their own lives while hiding in the school library. It was a horrifying day for the school, but it was even more horrifying for the families of the victims, who couldn't believe such a tragedy could happen on a school premises in broad daylight. According to reports, Klebold's parents had just paid his tuition and fees a few days prior. Nothing could have prepared them for the shocking incident.
Grant says Dylann Klebold's mother is shocked by the description of her son as a neo-Nazi killer.
She was upset that they were talking about all this prejudice. She says, Dee, we never teach prejudice in our home.
Although the cops couldn't do anything to punish the two killers since they were already dead, they managed to lay hold on the man who had purchased ammunition for them. Mark Maines was his name, and after his arrest, he became the scapegoat. The judge sentenced him to 6 years in prison. Philip Duran, another alibi in the crime, was sentenced to a few years in jail as well. Another set of people who also ended up on the receiving end of the malice, anger, and frustration of the victims' families were the parents of the two boys, Dylann Klebold and Eric Harris. The parents were simply overwhelmed by guilt, and the intense scrutiny from members of the public and media only made it worse. Many members of the public argued that charges should be filed against the parents. A study should have known what their children were up to. T.J. Lane. Born on September 19, 1994, T.J. Lane was just another high school kid with a knack for getting into trouble until one trouble cost him his freedom. This young man had gone on a rampage on his school campus back when he was 17, and though the drama only lasted for over a minute, it ruined TJ's life as well as that of his victims. That fateful day was February 27, 2012. TJ, in a feat of rage, had stormed his school cafeteria, pulled out a .22 caliber pistol, and fired 10 bullets at the students who were in his line of fire. 6 people were hit. 3 students, Russell King Jr., Demetrius Hewlin, and Danny Parmertor, died from their wounds. It's still a controversial mystery what exactly led to TJ's outburst of rage. No one knows if it's senseless violence or if the young chap had truly intended for his victims to die that day.
As soon as TJ Lane walked in, he was executing his plan, taking off his button-down shirt to reveal this. A white t-shirt with the word killer scribbled on it, showing it off with a smug smile on his face. He wore one like it the day of the shootings. Parents of the victims called Lane a monster, a pathetic excuse for a human being, and wished him a slow, torturous death.
I hate you for the pain you've caused, Nick. You chased him down the hall and fired the last bullet that paralyzed him. Why? Why did you do it? Why?
Throughout their statements, Lane just smiled, and at one point even raised his middle finger to victims' families. And his statement to the court, just too vulgar to say.
TJ Lane never apologized for his actions. He even wore a t-shirt with the word killer on the day of his trial. Plus, he had a twisted, wicked smile on his face. The victims' families were distressed beyond consolation, but they had some respite after the judge sentenced TJ to prison without the possibility of parole. Just in case you're wondering what made this young killer stone cold, it's majorly the effects of a sad upbringing. You see, TJ had a rough childhood. Throughout his early days, he notably had behavioral issues. Most of this stemmed from his parents' dysfunctional relationship. When his parents finally got divorced, TJ hit rock bottom. TJ was abused and also began to abuse others. He got admitted into a school for students with behavioral issues, but even so, he still got into altercations with other students. For such a troubled young man with a history of violence and bad behavior, it's no surprise that he had no regrets or feelings of sympathy for his crimes. He even laughed at his victims' families and gave them the middle finger on the day of his sentencing. TJ Lane's sister, who was also shocked at his atrocities, claimed that the TJ she saw in the courtroom, the one who committed these murders, was not the brother she knew. Interestingly, she went to the same school as TJ, and on the day TJ had launched his attack, she was there as well.
Sitting in that room in shock, as we all comforted one another, I heard a police officer outside of the window say that they suspected TJ Lane. When those words hit me, I shook and cried and denied that all this could be true.
6 people were shot, 3 killed, and the city of Chardon has never been the same.
Even the judge could tell that TJ was a monster in every possible way, which is why he was given 3 life sentences. He was incarcerated at the Allen Oakwood Correctional Center in Lima, Ohio. However, while TJ was at the Allen Correctional Center, he was known as a notorious inmate with a knack for getting into trouble. TJ violated several prison rules, including smoking, insulting, and assaulting superiors, and much more. He was even discovered with several things he shouldn't have access to, like having 3 new tattoos on his chest. How he got the tattoos while still being an inmate is something no one has been able to answer. TJ's troubles and insanity were unending. In just 18 months of his stay, he had already made the prison black books. He even attempted an escape once. His troublesome behavior was what forced his transfer to the Ohio State Penitentiary. Yet, it was still not enough for the young killer, as his attitude didn't change. Imagine being a prisoner and refusing to carry out routine tasks given to you by warders. Even when it came to prison education, TJ had no interest. To him, it was like torture. While others were in class learning, TJ would draw disturbing images of himself with the word killer. But while TJ may have willingly surrendered and pleaded guilty, he never imagined prison life would be so overwhelming. This is why, on September 11, 2014, Lane escaped from prison alongside 2 other inmates.
After more than a 6-hour manhunt, police finally captured TJ Lane, the teenager who shot and killed 3 students at Chardon, Ohio High School in 2012.
Well, obviously, I'm not happy that it's happened. I mean, no warden in my position would like something like this to happen. But the facts are, I'm happy to announce that we have Mr. Lane back in our custody.
The prison break was achieved by constructing a 13-foot mediocre ladder over the course of several months, and also taking advantage of a broken security cam in the prison yard. TJ and his accomplices didn't get far before they were caught. That's when they were moved to the Supermax Ohio State Penitentiary under protective custody. But even there, other inmates tried to take TJ's life due to his horrible attitude, and so he was finally moved to Warren Correctional Institution to live out his remaining years. Nicholas Cruz. The case of Nicholas Cruz is one of the most notorious high school crimes in history. It was on February 14, 2018, when the young man decided to launch a devastating attack at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. 17 people were killed, and another 17 were left badly injured. Prior to the shooting, Cruz had notable behavior issues, but no one thought he could be a mass murderer. It didn't help that he was also part of the school's varsity air rifle team. He knew how to handle a gun well, as shown in this cam footage where he was captured in a hallway making his way to the scene of the crime. It's still unknown who the lucky student who saw Cruz in this footage is, but certainly, if he had entered that hallway a few seconds later, he would have been the first to get shot. It has been speculated that this student left the building after seeing Cruz with the gun and then called the cops. Cruz was arrested that same day, and his massacre was titled the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history.
It's just released video of Nicholas Cruz the day he was arrested in connection with the Parkland school shooting, the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history.
That's Nicholas Cruz, the teenager responsible for killing 17 students in the Parkland school massacre shortly after being taken into custody on Valentine's Day. The just-released police video shows Cruz alone in an interrogation room.
During the interrogation, Cruz started acting crazy, like someone lost in his own mind. He even said these exact words, "Kill me."
He begins to mime shooting himself in the head over and over. Then the troubled 19-year-old killer repeatedly punches himself in the head and face. He repeatedly says, "Burn, kill, destroy." And when a police officer enters and asks if he wants some water, he replies, "I don't deserve it." Alone again, he sits chained to the floor and seems to pray to die.
Kill me.
Although prosecutors at his trial pressed for the death penalty, Cruz managed to get off with a life sentence. He ended up in a prison cell, shocked by the reality of how one simple action could ruin a once perfect life. However, he never imagined the horrors that were waiting for him in the facility. Born on September 24, 1998, Cruz was barely 20 years old when he committed the crime. He was kept in custody until 2022, when a judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For a man who killed 17 people, you would think that his initial days in prison wouldn't be so much of an issue, but that's not the case. Cruz got himself into trouble several times, and the tipping point was when he assaulted a prison guard, nearly ending his life.
This surveillance video of Nicholas Cruz fighting BSO Deputy Sergeant Raymond Beltran is crucial evidence in his battery against a law enforcement officer case from November 2018. Defense attorneys argued today that BSO didn't save video in the hours before the alleged attack that would tell the entire story.
We no longer have the benefit, and a jury will not have the benefit of viewing the video and the incidents or whatever occurred prior to the preservation of what we have. The jury will not get the benefit of looking at that video.
Just a few minutes before this attack, Cruz had been pacing up and down in the room where he was being held. He seemed agitated. Then in a flash, he pounced on the sergeant who had been sitting nearby, and an intense tussle followed. He didn't say why he did what he did, so it's hard to say if it was a manic episode or if Cruz probably intended to kill the cop and escape. Anyways, prosecutors weren't too happy with this development and mentioned it during his trial in 2022. Although the defense claimed the cops may have done something to upset Cruz before his violent reaction, the court found the footage evidence overwhelming, and so the judge showed no mercy when dishing out his final verdict. Cruz's murderous tendencies made him get transferred to a maximum security prison, where he barely got to see the light of day. For someone who killed 17 people and barely showed any emotions during his trial, Cruz never imagined that prison life could be so traumatizing. The young felon has even attempted suicide many times, prompting prison authorities to put him on suicide watch. Cruz probably never knew he would suffer all of this in that moment when he pulled the trigger on hundreds of innocent people. But yet, it's his doom, and it's unlikely that Cruz will survive or escape his living hell. Gabriel Gabriel Parker. It was on a Tuesday morning in downtown Benton, Kentucky, when reports began to fly about a teenage gunman who had fun on a rampage in a high school. This gunman, a 15-year-old student of Marshall County High School. Parker's mass shootout led to a stampede with great casualties. 2 people died, 16 were wounded, while 4 others sustained various injuries. The 2 deceased were Bailey Holt and Preston Cope, both 15 years of age. The mass murder would have claimed more lives, save for the timely intervention of the police. Parker had entered the school with a handgun at about 8:57 a.m. and started shooting. This was just before classes started. Students and teachers began fleeing for cover as Parker made his way from the commons area to the classrooms. Some teachers helped some of the kids who weren't able to run out of the building fast enough to find good places to hide. It wasn't up to 2 minutes after Parker had begun his attack that the first 911 call got to the cops, followed by a barrage of more callers, all reporting the same case. When the cops showed up, they arrested Parker on the scene, but not before he had done damage to innocent high schoolers. Parents and guardians who rushed to the school premises upon hearing the news were devastated. Parker was charged with 2 counts of murder and 12 counts of first-degree assault. Prosecutors decided to charge Parker as an adult, not just because of the nature of the crime, although he was just 15.
Raw emotions in court as families held nothing back when addressing the teen who killed 2 students in a Kentucky school shooting. News Channel 5's Matthew Torres brings us their words as 18-year-old Gabriel Parker was sentenced to life in prison today.
It was in January 2018 when 2 students died and several others had to be flown here to Vanderbilt after a school shooting in Kentucky. More than 2 years later, the teen gunman is finally sentenced.
She was the most precious, beautiful, and selfless soul on this earth, and you took her from us.
There were no mincing words when addressing the gunman who killed her 15-year-old daughter, Bailey Holt. Standing next to her husband, Secret Holt also shared harsh words for his parents.
Their parenting skills are obviously demented and have raised nothing but a worthless demon.
Close to 10 people read statements in front of 18-year-old Gabriel Parker right before the judge handed down 2 life sentences with the possibility of parole after 20 years.
Parker's sentence finally came in 2020 when he was given 2 life sentences. But that's not all. He also received an additional 70 years in prison in connection to the crime. He's been in prison ever since, and despite his show of remorse during trial, there's no way he's getting out. Dylann Roof. One of the youngest perpetrators of a high school murder was Dylann Roof. The young teenager was barely mature when he edged his name into the state's criminal records and earned himself a life behind bars. It was on June 17, 2015, when young Roof opened fire at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in South Carolina. He killed 9 African-American clergymen, including the senior pastor, Clementa C. Pinckney.
One by one, they arrive at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, preparing for a weekly Bible study class. You even see a little girl go inside. They couldn't know that just 30 minutes later, a rampage would erupt. They hug in the parking lot. They embrace at the door. One woman shows off a poster board to another parishioner. And this is chilling. You can see a black car pulling into a parking space. It's the killer, Dylann Roof, getting out of the car. He walks to the front door. He adjusts his sweatshirt. His gun is believed to be hidden underneath. There's Roof, just sitting there, waiting to open fire. And look at this, Roof leaving the church, the .45 caliber gun in his hand. He gets in his car and pulls away. For the families of the victims, reliving the nightmare in court has been an emotional experience.
Roof was then apprehended by the police and made to face trial. During the trial, he showed absolutely no remorse, making his life imprisonment sentence even more justifiable. He is currently serving time in ADX Florence, enduring the sad, lonely life of prison. Roof's own part of the prison is the maximum security wing, housing the most dangerous and high-profile individuals ever. According to reports, Roof is barely given any luxuries in prison, as he spends nearly all the hours of the day inside his cell. The only respite for him is a brief, supervised, 1-hour recreational exercise and visitation from a few selected people. Even with all these restrictions, prison authorities still aren't sure of this young man staying in line or turning a new leaf. This is why regular psychological examinations are being conducted on Roof to not only remind him of his nasty crimes, but also ensure he isn't up to anything crazy. Salvador Ramos. Salvador Ramos was the perpetrator and mastermind behind the now famous Uvalde school shooting, a massive shooting that occurred on May 24, 2022 at Robb Elementary School, Uvalde, Texas. That day had begun like any other until Ramos drove down to school, strolled in with a rifle, and began firing at his classmates. But unlike most high school gunmen who simply turn themselves in or commit suicide when the cops show up, Ramos put up a fight. He barricaded himself inside a classroom and exchanged bullets with the cops who had come to put him down. Surprisingly, Ramos held his ground so well that the cops were unable to breach the classroom. It was a hellstorm. The police had to declare a state of emergency on the school grounds, making it out of bounds to everyone due to the dangerous criminal assassin, Ramos. Even parents who had come to rescue their children were hindered from going into the school grounds. In fact, it wasn't until the U.S. Customs Border Patrol Tactical Unit came around that he was finally contained. This was after 1 hour and 14 minutes of intense gun battle and tension. With Ramos down, officers were finally able to go in and rescue the school kids. But unfortunately, the majority were already dead. This reality sparked outrage from the public, as many felt the police should have charged in from the start rather than exchange bullets with the criminal. After authorities had conducted a head count, it was discovered that 19 students and 2 teachers were killed in the shooting. None of the kids were above 10 years of age. They were all in 4th grade. The teachers, on the other hand, were in their 40s. Many of the deceased died on their way to the hospital after sustaining bullet wounds. 2 cops were shot as well, though their wounds weren't fatal, so they survived.
Inside this Texas elementary school, terrified children were in hiding, barricaded in classrooms as an 18-year-old gunman went on a killing rampage.
He shot and killed horrifically, incomprehensibly.
For parents of the young students, the wait for news was excruciating, and tragically, often there were no answers.
They don't know where she's at.
I'm just praying that my little one is okay.
The gunman has been identified as a local high school student. He was armed with a handgun, an AR-15 style assault rifle, and several high-capacity magazines.
For a young 18-year-old who was raised in this same institution, you would think Ramos wouldn't have the heart to commit such an atrocity. But then, his heart may have been hardened through the countless times he got bullied at school. Ramos was bullied for many reasons: his poor background, his stutter, his short haircut, and more. He had no friends. Perhaps these were what edged him onto a path of violence and crime. Officers found several violent threats Ramos had posted online before his death. For instance, he threatened to kidnap and rape girls on an app named Uvalde, and he also once threatened to commit a school shooting. Some users also claimed he often live-streamed himself abusing and killing animals like cats. It's safe to say Salvador Ramos deserved what he got. That's all for this video. Let us know in the comments which of these cases you found most interesting. Also, smash the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos like these. See you in the next video.